Okay, chapter 5. Chapter 5 gives you a ton of information. It's kind of hard to break it down quickly, I'm afraid. So hang on, here we go. Um, so in this chapter, again, you get some stuff from the kids. Dill asks Scout to marry him. I think she's 6 going on 7, and he's 7 going on 8. So remember those little first grade romances that you had where you chased each other around the playground? Maybe you until you were boyfriend girlfriend, and then you just ignore each other. So basically Dill asks Scout to marry him. She agrees, and then he starts ignoring her, and she is not going to stand for that, and so she beats him up twice. This is part of why I love Scout. She is a tomboy. This is not okay behavior. I mean, it's really not now either, but it's definitely not okay behavior for girls in the 1930s. And she's beating up boys. So in this chapter, you meet Miss Maudie Atkinson. So remember our map. Miss Maudie lives across the street, and the kids really like Miss Maudie. She is super important to this book. She represents the people of the town that think things through instead of believing a story. You've got Miss Stephanie Crawford. She's the town gossip. Miss Maudie is kind of like the reasonable person of the town. She is the voice of reason, and she is the kids' friends. In number 3 on your worksheet, Miss Maudie is a chameleon lady because she goes out, works in her yard in her jeans. Actually, she wears men's overalls because they didn't make pants for women in this time period. So if you wore pants, you had to wear boys' or men's pants. But she can go out during the daytime and work in her garden wearing men's overalls and get dirty and nasty. And then she comes in, she takes her bath, and she dresses up like a lady and is a lady in the evening having tea and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. Girls and boys, we don't really think about it anymore. I think I've talked about how those of you don't really know me all that well. But I'm a huge tomboy. I move into the lake. I love to be at the lake. I've been driving boats since I was 13, 12. I four wheelers, go karts. I mean, all of it. I love being outdoors. I love being in the mud, whatever. This was not acceptable back in that time period. So, girls, we're really lucky that things have changed for us. And we don't have to abide by these social rules of what girls can do versus what boys can do. Do they still exist? Yes. Are they as strict and hardcore as they were back then? No. Um, so Miss Maudie is a really different type of woman. She is a woman who is already standing up and doing what she wants to do. Oh gosh, now the dogs are fighting. It's like Call of the Wild around here. Look at this. Really? Are you done? Ay, ay, ay. So, oh gosh, now the dog just sat on the computer. Sorry. Okay, so Miss Maudie, she is very, very different. She's different than most people. She has paved the way for girls to be different. Number one, because she wears pants. Number two, because she does work out in her garden. Just not a normal thing for women at the time. The other thing is that she is friends with the kids. So in this time period, a lot of times kids were to be seen but not heard. And Miss Maudie doesn't think that way. She likes to visit with the kids. She likes them to come to her house, and she does special things for them. When she's going to make a cake for someone in the neighborhood, she makes another cake for the kids and lets them have a small cake. Things like that. Scout really likes Miss Maudie because she is that different type of woman. She doesn't place those social expectations on Scout. One of the things that she does is she takes out her bridge work, which is basically her dentures with, she's got a couple false teeth, and she clicks them out and pulls them out. And like, that is so not something that a woman should do. And yet Miss Maudie does it in front of the kids. And Scout is just like, oh, dang, if I can be like her, then being a woman's not so bad. Okay, so that's what Miss Maudie does for her. Miss Maudie also tells the kids, she is kind of that voice of reason, like I said. She talks to the kids about Boo Radley. She makes them call him Arthur because that's his real name. She talks about the fact that most of the stories are made up. You know, she's even gotten in Stephanie Crawford's face one time when she told me that he was peeking in her window. You know, she sasses off to her. Um, she also says some things about Atticus. So, on page 46, there's a quote there that's really important to the book, and it says that Miss Maudie says, Atticus Finch is the same in his house as he is on public streets, which means what you see is what you get. He doesn't act one way in town, he doesn't act one way in public, and then act a completely different way at home. Unfortunately, a lot of people do. Okay? Um, Not Atticus, though. Just a minute, my phone's ringing. Sorry. Okay, sorry. That was the people who are doing the phone and internet at my new house at the lake. And those are my dogs barking. Um, they can't come and lay it because of the stay at home order being extended. And that's the only reason that I haven't moved yet. So, because I don't have internet, um, I can't move. And I have to have internet so that I can teach you guys. So, I haven't moved yet, just for you guys. Anyway, going back to number 9, Miss Maudie's statement about Atticus Finch is the same in his house as he is on public streets. He has nothing to hide. He doesn't act differently. Atticus represents the good, moral people in the town. He doesn't say one thing. He's not a hypocrite, so he doesn't say one thing when he's downtown and then do differently at home or vice versa. So remember that, because what you see is what you get. He doesn't hide anything. Number 10 talks about their relationship changing. That's a huge thing going on too. Remember, Jem is almost 12, and so Scout's getting to be close to 8 as we're moving along. So they're like 11 and 7 right now. And Jem is just, you know, he's starting to approach that teenager phase. If you're the oldest, you know what it's like not wanting to be around your younger sibs. And so they're just kind of growing apart. And there's a lot of stuff being said about Scout, stop being such a girl, which is meant to be a negative put down comment. All right, the next thing that happens, I ask you about the plans in number 11 that the boys have. So Dill is still consumed with trying to get Boo Radley to come out. They just want to see him. They just want to see what he's like, all that kind of stuff. And so they come up with plans. In true form of children, they come up with a plan that, when you think about it, it's so ridiculous to give to an adult. So Arthur Radley has not been out of the house in, I believe, 15 years. And the boys come up with this plan to stick a note on the end of a fishing pole. And they're going to stand on the sidewalk and reach across the yard with that fishing pole and stick the note in between the shutters. And the note asks him to come outside to go get an ice cream with them. Because every adult who has been in the house for 15 years is going to come out to have ice cream with some kids. It's just so ridiculous that it makes me laugh. Like, you have to stop and think about the ridiculousness of it. So they're out there, and when Scout hears about it, she's like, no, you can't do that. I'm going to tell. And of course, they're like, well, if you're too much of a girl, then stay home. So again, that negative connotation of being a girl is a negative thing. They finally end up all going. They come up with a great plan, and one kid stands on one corner, one kid stands on another corner, Jem's in the middle with the fishing pole and the note. And if either kid sees somebody coming to catch them, you know, they're supposed to either yell, or Dill has a bell that he's supposed to ring. And so they're trying to stick that note through there, and it keeps falling, it gets dirty. And both of the watcher kids forget to watch, and then all of a sudden, by the time Dill realizes somebody's coming, Atticus is already right there in his face. And I just love this passage. It's on page 49 if you want to turn in your books to that spot, But as a parent, I love it. You know, Atticus is a lawyer. He's got that courteous detachment that we talked about. And he says, stop ringing that bell, because he's like ringing the bell right in Atticus's face. And so Dill stops, but then the silence is just awful. And of course, he says, what are you doing? And the response from the kids, nothing. And he says, I don't want to hear any of that. You tell me. We were just trying to give something to Mr. Radley. What were you trying to give him? Just a letter. Let me see it. Jem held out a filthy piece of paper. Atticus took it and tried to read it. Why do you want Mr. Radley to come out? Dill said, we thought he might enjoy us. And he dried up when Atticus looked at him, like he just stopped talking. Son, he said to Jem, I'm going to tell you something and tell you one time. Have your parents ever said that to you? I'm going to tell you one time and one time only. Okay? Son, I'm going to tell you something and tell you one time. Stop tormenting that man. And that goes for the other two of you. And he goes on, this next paragraph, it's not in quotation marks, but it's Scout telling what Atticus said to them. Okay? Listen to everything that he says to them, all the things that he knows that they've been doing, all the things that are going on here. What Mr. Radley did was his own business. If he wanted to come out, he would. If he wanted to stay inside his own house, he had the right to stay inside, free from the attentions of inquisitive children, which was mild terms for the likes of us. How would we like it if Atticus barged in on us without knocking when we were in our rooms at night? We were, in effect, doing the same thing to Mr. Radley. What Mr. Radley did might seem peculiar to us, but it did not seem peculiar to him. Furthermore, had it never occurred to us that the civil way to communicate with another being was by the front door instead of a side window? Lastly, we were to stay away from that house until we were invited there. We were not to play an asinine game he had seen us playing, or make fun of anybody on this street or in this town. You stop this nonsense right now, every one of you. That's his version of reprimanding them, of telling them that they need to stop it, that they need to leave him alone. So here's the thing, here's a guy who's completely different than the rest of the town, and the kids won't leave him alone. And Atticus says what he does is his business. Leave him alone. Don't judge him. Don't bother him. Leave him alone. Another good life lesson from Atticus Finch.